What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTP Ravens Media, bringing Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that daily Ravens content, make sure the subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bell as well if you want to be notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, in this video today, I'm talking about none other than Nook, aka Deandre Hopkins. He was officially released today. He is free to sign with whatever team he wants. And I had talked about him before, not once he had been cut. I had to like make sure I like went back to double check old videos. I was like, have I not talked about this? I have not. The last time I talked about him on the channel was about a month ago. Talking about how the Pac-Man Jones, I'd been talking about, DeAndre Hopkins really thinking Baltimore could be a spot. And that was right before Lamar ended up getting that big contract extension. So haven't talked about it. Here we go. If you didn't know, DeAndre Hopkins was cut by the Arizona Cardinals, and there are reports that the Ravens screwed over the Kansas City Chiefs in trying to get a deal, but with what they paid Odell Beckham Jr., the Chiefs were like, "Oh, we're not going to be able to pay for that." But in this video, I really want to just get into the details of do the Ravens need him? Because originally, right, when talking about DeAndre Hopkins, it was all about Lamar said, "Get me Odell, get me Hop." Said, we don't know if that was said, but reports were saying that Lamar said, "Get me Odell, get me DeAndre Hopkins, and then we can talk." Okay, and once that happened, I was like, "Okay, can they do it? Should they do that? Should they go after him? Should they, try and reach out and find a way to get it done?" Trade a second round pick, trade a future first, whatever it was. People were doing all kinds of crazy trade scenarios to bring DeAndre Hopkins to Baltimore. And it makes sense because the thought was if you get him, you can re-sign Lamar. But then Lamar Jackson re-signed. And it was like, oh, maybe we don't need DeAndre Hopkins. And the thought was still there, right? You go into the draft, people are looking at it and they're like, Arizona Cardinals last year made a trade in day one with the Baltimore Ravens, trading for Hollywood Brown. I believe the Ravens got the 23rd pick and then traded back to the 25th, if I'm remembering correctly. But they made a trade. Maybe they do it again with the Ravens. And then there were reports of the Titans are pushing heavily to get pick 3. And then CJ Stroud ended up going. But then the reports of the Titans want DeAndre Hopkins and pick 3. And a ton of things were happening with that. It was like the Ravens kind of fell out of the picture. And then it was like, all right, the Ravens have Odell. We draft Zay Flowers. The thought of a wide receiver was no longer on the Ravens fans' mind as to what they need. It shifted to edge rusher. It shifted to corner, right? Now we signed Kyle Blue Kelly, or not Kyle Blue Kelly. We did sign Kyle Blue Kelly, but we signed Rocky Sin. Okay, maybe corner's fixed. Maybe it's not fixed, but maybe it's not something to focus on. Maybe it's edge rusher. But when a superstar like DeAndre Hopkins is available, how do you not have interest? And that was something that happened with, I believe Jeff Zrebiec came out with an article talking about how could you not reach out? How could you not attempt? Of course the Ravens are interested. It's whether or not they would pull the trigger. And something that I wanted to highlight, this comes from Pedro on Twitter at @HORMES_. I believe it's Rormes. Shout out to Pedro. Follow him. He puts out great stuff. But he put out, I want to highlight this tweet. He said, "I don't really understand why people have this conception that the Ravens couldn't make work having Odell Beckham Jr., DeAndre Hopkins, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews. And that they would have to ship someone away. Why? Other elite offenses in the league do it." I will put the link to this tweet in the comments. You guys can read the full thing, but I want to go through the target share that he posted. Again, really good work by him. I do want to highlight him. I'll put his Twitter in the comment section as well as in the video description. But points out Kansas City, right? The elite offense. He points out Kansas City, Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati. Kansas City wide receiver 1 Juju had 109 targets. MVS had 87. Sky Moore had 41. Mecole Hardman had 36. And Travis Kelce had 182. Patrick Mahomes attempted 757 targets. That's 302 extra targets that went to other players outside of those top 4. And a reminder, the Ravens' top 4 would be Odell, Hopkins, Flowers, Bateman. Those would be the top 4. Buffalo, Stephon Diggs had 166. Gabe Davis had 106. Isaiah McKenzie had 64. Khalil Shakir had 23. And Dawson Knox had 77. There were 219 leftover targets after those guys. And that goes to the running backs and backup tight ends and such. For the Ravens, that would be, J.K. Dobbins, Isaiah Likely, maybe Nelson Aguilar gets a little bit, whatever. Philadelphia, A.J. Brown, 158. Devontae Smith, 154. Quez Watkins, 53. Zach Pascal, 22. Dallas Goedert, 88. 148 targets left over. Cincinnati, Jamar Chase, 155. T. Higgins, 125. Tyler Boyd, 87. Trenton Irwin, 26. And Hayden Hurst, 87. 239 targets left over. If the Ravens were to do something like this, I think the Cincinnati number is the most reasonable, but switch Jamar Chase's numbers with Hayden Hurst, right? Mark Andrews would get the 150 targets, and then maybe the Odell or Hopkins would get the 87. But I think that's the most realistic comparison. Again, I don't think it's perfect because the Ravens are going to throw the ball as much as those other teams. But it can work, right? When you are a pass-heavy offense, that can work. And a lot of people are saying that if you were to, or not a lot of people, I've seen people say, if you were going to go out and get a DeAndre Hopkins, that's going to mess with Rashad Bateman's confidence, and that's going to mess with his play. And yes, I think it would. I think it would reduce his role significantly. But at the same time, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but who cares? Like, if you're doing that and you are making your team better and it hurts a young player that you like, and they're no longer going to get snaps, but it makes the team better for a team trying to contend. If it makes them mad, get rid of them. We did the same thing to Patrick Queen. We traded for Roquan Smith and paid him. Right? We did the same thing drafting Kyle Hamilton. Yeah, did it hurt Chuck Clark's confidence? Did it hurt his feelings? Absolutely. But the Ravens were trying to make the team better. So if your argument for don't get Hopkins because it'll make Bateman upset, I don't like that argument, personally. I think it would make him upset. But if you make someone now, I think it'd be wide receiver 3. I think Bateman's still ahead of Zay on the depth chart. We'll see how it goes this year. But, okay. We're trying to win right now. You're still going to play. But with that all said, again, I'm not a fan of the move. I'm not pro DeAndre Hopkins to Baltimore because I think edge rusher is more valuable. And, people may be saying, well, why are you saying that about the Bateman thing? I'm all for the Ravens improving. Like, if the Ravens had edge rusher situated, I would be all in on DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, get him. Adding a weapon will never make your team worse. Now, sometimes adding an offensive lineman might, like Alejandro Villanueva, but adding a wide receiver, a superstar wide receiver, is not going to make your team worse. And DeAndre Hopkins would likely be getting a 3-year deal, and that would cost a lot of money. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins is signing an Odell Beckham Jr. type of deal of a 1-year, $15 million, potentially, $17-18 million deal that Odell signed. I don't see him doing that. Why? Because he's been playing. He got suspended last year. He came back from being suspended, and he looked really good. But in my opinion, the edge rusher position is more valuable to the Baltimore Ravens right now, and just the defensive line in general, because we lost Calais, we lost Justin Houston, we lost JPP. We can bring some of those guys back, not Calais, but JPP, Justin Houston. I think the Ravens should absolutely do that. It's just, will they? And I think they need that money. And I think, as much as I love DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's probably going to be Hall of Fame wide receiver when it's all said and done. I don't think it's necessarily worth it to make your offense a little bit better, or even a lot better, when I think the defense has a hole, or at least has a larger hole than the wide receiver position does. And there's good players to sign at edge rusher. If Justin Houston was gone and unavailable, and JPP was unavailable, and Leonard Floyd was unavailable, then I'd be like, yeah, go after Hopkins, because why not? There's nobody else to really go after. But there are players. There are players that are good for the edge rusher position. I think the Ravens can use their money a little bit better. But let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think? Should the Ravens sign DeAndre Hopkins? Do they need to sign DeAndre Hopkins? And what type of contract would you give him? Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.